Hello and welcome to today's Modernizing and Securing Financial Environments EcoCast event. On today's event, you'll hear from experts at Nutanix, Zerto, Rubrik, and NetApp. We've got a great presentation lined up just for those of you out there in the FinServ industry or financial services. Now, before we jump into it, there's just a little bit of housekeeping information that you need to be aware of. We have prizes that we'll be announcing on the event. I'll talk about the prize terms and conditions as well as the specific prizes in just a moment. Questions, we want this to be an educational event. So we encourage you to use the questions box that's there on the left-hand side of your audience console. In fact, I can call your attention to it now. That's where you should ask your questions about today's topics. I know many of you out there in the financial services industries are facing unique challenges, and our expert presenters have years of experience in providing solutions specifically for the financial services industry. So ask away, and we will be doing dedicated Q&A sessions with each of today's presenters with the top questions that come in. Social, we want this to be a social event. We'll be tweeting about this over on Twitter. You can tweet directly from your audience console using the Twitter icon on the bottom of the screen. The hashtag for today's event is ATM EcoCast, and I'll remind you of that again here in just a moment. But we encourage your tweets over on Twitter, and I'll be monitoring Twitter throughout the event. And then finally, resources. We have a number of handouts there in the Handouts tab. There are 3 PDFs and 1 special link from NetApp. So make sure you download those PDFs from Rubrik, Nutanix, and Zerto, and check out that link from NetApp as well. They are over there in the Handouts tab to the left of your slides window. Now, the prizes for today's event are 3 $500 Amazon gift cards. You must be present on the live event to be eligible for these prize drawings. I'll be announcing the prize winners after each of the presenters on the event today. Actually, there are 4 presenters, so after the second, third, and fourth presenters. So keep an eye out for those prize announcements. And the prize requirements are all prize winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media. We'll reach out to the prize winners after the event via email, and the full prize terms and conditions can be found there in the Handouts tab. Now, Actual Tech Media has been partnering with Direct Relief and supporting them. And until COVID-19 is beat, we will be donating $500 to Direct Relief for every MegaCast, EcoCast, and Summit event that we run. Direct Relief provides PPE to frontline healthcare workers, and they've been doing a great job, and we've been doing our best to support them, and we encourage you to do that as well. We've also been donating to select charities, the Diane Fossey Gorilla Fund and One Tree Planted, in partnership with the Gorilla Guide Book Club. You can click on gorilla.club. Actually, you can go to your web browser and type in gorilla.guide, and you can download tons of free electronic books on a variety of IT topics and solutions, and they're all completely free, very high quality. The Gorilla Guide Book Club is an excellent free resource for IT professionals, and I encourage you to check it out. Now, the hashtag for today's event on Twitter is ATM EcoCast, and like I said, you can tweet directly using the Twitter icon on the bottom of your console. You can follow Actual Tech Media on Twitter. In fact, there's an icon on the top right-hand side of your console for Twitter to connect to Actual Tech Media's homepage. And, of course, feel free to follow me as well. I am David M. Davis, and always excited to chat on Twitter about the latest and greatest in enterprise tech. You can also subscribe to Actual Tech Media, our YouTube channel, Facebook page, and the 10 on Tech podcast. Those are available on the top right-hand corner of your console, specifically the YouTube page, as well as our LinkedIn channel. That's where we're posting all of our latest and greatest content. So make sure you follow Actual Tech Media on LinkedIn. Now, before I introduce you to our first presenter on today's event from Rubrik, I've got just a few stage setting slides, if you will, kind of a mini keynote to set the stage for the upcoming presentations. And then I've got a few poll questions that I'll be sharing with you We appreciate your answers, and I'll be sharing the responses that everyone provides to most of the questions so you can see how you stack up with your peers. So with that, let's jump into today's topic, which is modernizing and securing financial environments. Now, this little mini keynote here is entitled 5 Things to Know About Modernizing and Securing FinServ IT, as it's known. So, there's 5 things that I came up with here to try to highlight this topic today. And the first one is that financial services is unique. Financial services includes not just banks and investment companies, but there's a whole ecosystem of FinServ companies out there, including insurance, real estate, tax planning, and so much more. And what's unique about it is that these are all highly regulated verticals and industries, and they have much more focus on compliance than any other vertical, or than many other verticals, I should say, out there. Now, traditional financial organizations might not innovate as rapidly as other verticals, and I know there's some of you out there saying, hey, wait, we innovate really fast. And so that's not to say that all of them don't, but traditionally, because of the regulation and compliance issues, that has slowed down some innovation. But newer fintech companies that are starting up are really pushing innovation, and you see that a lot out on the internet. Financial services or fintech companies that are offering things like online banking, online real estate transactions, stock trading, so much more. So again, this is a unique segment, a unique vertical out there with unique needs and unique requirements. And one of those is security. Because fintech or fin services companies have so much personal information, or PII, personally identifiable information, and financial information, security is more critical in financial services than many other organizations out there. And I think you'll see experts on today's event kind of highlighting security because it's so critical. And unfortunately, fin services companies are also much more prone to attack and fraud than other companies out there. They're big targets because attackers know that financial services companies have all of this personally identifiable information that could be very valuable. Another key here is that visibility is key. In financial services, you need visibility to all of this data, to the archive of the data, to your availability of that data in case there's some sort of data breach or disaster of some kind. So data protection is critical. Availability, disaster recovery, these are all critical, and having visibility into that is all very critical as well. And then finally, compliance. Compliance is just a must. You have to know that you're compliant at all times because it's the law, basically. So I said I had 5 things to know about fin services IT. Those are 4. The 5th one is hey, I think we have a great event lined up for you today. I've seen presentations from all of today's experts, and you'll be seeing some really cool stuff on this event, and it's tailored just for financial services companies like you out there on today's EcoCast. So thank you so much for joining us. If I didn't say it before, we know that your time in IT is valuable and always very busy. So thank you for taking time to join us on today's EcoCast. So now I've got 3 quick poll questions I want to share with you before I introduce you to today's first presenter. So the first poll question on the screen, and if you haven't answered these before, you just answer right there in the slides window. This poll question says, which of these are your top project for 2020? And I'm curious to find out what the results of this poll is. I'll share the results with you. And you'll see there the last option on the list is other project not listed. And just drop it in the questions box, please, because I will share that project with everyone here right on the event because I'm curious. I want to improve this poll for the future, and I also want to share your project. All right, first one came in here. Matthew is saying standardization of APIs across all platforms. Very nice. Good feedback. I didn't have that on the list at all, and I find it fascinating that that is a project. Standardization of APIs. All right, lots of good responses coming in. Thank you. Matthew, thank you everyone else out there who's responding here. I don't want to skew the results by giving you a sneak of who the leader is. All right, let me share the results of this poll with you. And 59% said improving security is their top project for 2020. And then below that, it was almost a tight horse race here. 33% moving to hybrid cloud, 35% replacing aging infrastructure, 31% optimizing IT, 32% enabling remote workers, 6% said a project not listed. Again, I encourage you to drop that in the questions box, and I will share it with everyone out there. Next poll question on the screen is, with the impact of COVID on business of all sizes, where do you see your IT budget going in 2020 and beyond? Do you see it increasing, staying the same, or decreasing? Let's see, Trish just said that her other top project is business continuity plans need to be totally re-examined due to many COVID-19 remote worker issues or status. Very interesting. I'm sure that's, I mean, I remember when I spent a few years doing just disaster recovery planning, a pandemic was never on the list of disasters that we planned for. There was tornadoes, floods, fires, everything like that, but a pandemic was just not on the horizon at all. So I know many companies out there are having to rework their business continuity plan and rework their remote work solutions. All right, thank you everyone who responded to this poll. I'll share the results of this one as well. And look at that, 48% said staying the same, 27% said increasing. That's very interesting to see. So if you total that up, that's, let's see, I can't do math, 75%, 77%, something like that, that actually said their budgets are either staying the same or increasing. 23% said budgets are decreasing. And then final poll question before I introduce you to our first presenter. And that is, what's your time frame for adding new or updating existing IT solutions at your company? So if you're on this event, it's likely you're interested in new IT solutions of some kind, learning what's out there, what you might do to improve or optimize your IT infrastructure or software, cloud, disaster recovery. So again, here, just looking for your time frame. Let's see, another comment came in. Tony said his other project is vulnerability management improvements with integration of threat intelligence feeds. Very cool stuff, Tony. Very cool. Thank you for sharing that with us. All right. Thank you, everyone who responded to that poll question. We do appreciate it. And now it's time to introduce our first presenter on today's EcoCast. I'm excited to introduce Shayan Shafi, who is a product marketing manager at Rubrik. Shayan, are you there?
Yeah, I'm on. Can you hear me clearly?
I can, yeah. Thank you for being here. Take it away.
Yeah. Thanks for the introduction. So as just mentioned earlier, my name is Shayan, and I'm on the product marketing team here at Rubrik. And for today's session, we're primarily going to be focusing on just there's the title slide, just a high-level overview of what exactly Rubrik is, just a quick 101 on what essentially brought Rubrik into the market and what the product does. And so after that, we'll be moving into a quick overview of how exactly the products can help meet a lot of the needs that we're seeing with a lot of financial services customers, more specifically in the context of a lot of financial services regulations, especially that we're seeing in North America, EMEA, even all the way out in APJ. A lot of these organizations are kind of looking towards each other to design these regulations and make sure that there's a lot of global standardization. And so we've been working with a lot of our customers to kind of flesh out a lot of those responses to the regulating bodies and communicate how the product kind of meets compliance. And at the end, once we're done, we'll go ahead and kind of open the floor for questions, and I'll work through the chat and try and address anything that comes up. And so to start with the whole Rubrik 101 kind of section, the best way to kind of look at this is really looking at the data management landscape from 1990s to present. And so if you look at this, we can really say there's kind of two tracks of equipment here. So there's the backup and replication software, and separately on the bottom, there's the whole backup storage piece. And so each of these components, and there's a lot of them here, right? Each of these components has to be monitored, managed, updated, maintained, scaled, patched. All sorts of responsibilities go into maintaining each of these components for your data management. And this is just your backup component of that. And if you look even further into the future, or really a part of this timeline from the 90s to present, it gets even worse, right? I mean, look at the bottom component. It expands with now adding backup storage to the piece. You still have to manage tape in your offsite archives. And then on the top there's now all this metadata that comes into the fore, and all of that needs to be deduped as well. And so basically the situation didn't get any better, and kind of counterintuitive to the whole concept of technology, which is that things improve and become more simple over time. If anything, it's becoming worse, which is kind of indicative of just poor planning and a poorly designed infrastructure to begin with. And so basically the force that brought Rubrik into the market is the idea that you can take all of these different legacy components of your data management and backup infrastructure and consolidate all of it into a single software that's basically going to be infinitely scalable, the cloud scale, and it's going to work with your public and private cloud infrastructure services. And so it's the idea that you can basically eliminate all of those hassles that came with managing all those different legacy components and just use a single software fabric that's going to stretch across all of your data centers, edge sites, colo sites, public clouds. It can be used to support your SaaS applications. And it's going to be this abstracted kind of ephemeral software concept that's going to be protecting all of those workloads in all those different places. And now you can finally unlock the simplicity of the public cloud rather than having to deal with all of those different legacy components on-prem. And so putting it all together, we have what I kind of like to call the left, center, right model. And so here on the left, you'll see your protected apps. And really, it doesn't matter where they're running. Here we have them kind of running on commoditized, just on-prem servers. And so these can be virtual machines, can be Linux operating systems, it can be SQL Server databases, Oracle databases, physical or virtualized. It can be file sets. It really doesn't matter what it is or where it's running. The idea is that you can kind of have your protected apps here on the left. You can have Rubrik deployed somewhere in the center. And here we have what we call the SLA policy engine, which is really the heartbeat of the Rubrik platform. And it's basically this radically new policy-based approach towards protecting your applications, where you basically just specify your backup frequency and retention requirements, and everything is pretty much automated from there, right? Rubrik handles the rest with these automated incremental backups. And from there, we archive the data to the locations that you see on the right. And so this is the common case for when most customers are getting started with Rubrik. They want to protect their applications. They want to simplify their backup process, and they want to unlock the cloud, finally, that you'll see there in the top right, for step one of their cloud journey, which is typically just data archival and backup modernization. And so that's really just the backup component of the architecture. Another key thing to note is that Rubrik CDM is also built on an API-first architecture. Now, what that means is basically that any capability that's available through the Rubrik UI is also going to be available through the Rubrik API. And so this enables all the integrations that you see here across monitoring tools like Splunk, all the way down to config management tools like Ansible, Chef, and Puppet. And a lot of these use cases, it's like provisioning infrastructure and then automating the protection of that infrastructure the instant it's provisioned. And pretty much the same concept in the cloud with a lot of the infrastructure as code platforms like Terraform. And so all of these tooling integrations are actually published on our GitHub. They're available for download. And so they're going to be ready pretty much straight out of the box. And you can go on there and download them from our GitHub. But they're also published on what we call Rubrik Build, which is our developer community, where we have a pretty loyal set of developers. We have a great, strong developer community. that is constantly submitting, designing, and making these new applications specifically for the CDM platform. And you can kind of go on there and get them, and they just work straight out of the box. And so we have some great customer stories around this as well. Here we have one with Accenture, global Fortune 500 consulting firm. And here we can see that they're basically able to drive hundreds of thousands of dollars in savings and automating the activity that was previously left for a more senior engineer, but they were now able to delegate to a more junior engineer and leverage those time savings, which again was hundreds of thousands of dollars for the more senior engineer to do more strategic work and do more higher value adding activities, not only for the firm, but obviously for their clients as well. And so the API piece is a really big part of the Rubrik story, but putting that together with some of the more core capabilities of the platform, really, I think what gets a lot of customers excited is when we talk about how it simplifies their cloud journey. And so we kind of walked through that left, center, right model earlier, but in terms of the cloud journey, we really like to look at it in terms of a crawl, walk, and run. And so when most customers are getting started with Rubrik, again, typically their starting point is that they're protecting virtualized infrastructure on-prem, and then they're archiving a lot of these backups to the public cloud. And so at the beginning, there's some general clamor, some excitement, finally leveraging the cloud for long-term retention, getting rid of tape, modernizing their backup infrastructure, getting rid of all those components that we looked at the beginning there. But as they begin to mature with regard to their cloud journey, they want to graduate from using the cloud for just storage to now using it for compute. And so here you can see in the second part here, for cloud instantiation, this is like if you've taken a backup of a VM, let's say you've archived it to the cloud, let's say an S3 bucket, and now you want to instantiate that backup as, let's say, an AWS EC2 instance. And this is commonly used for lifting and shifting applications, just migrating applications to the cloud. It can be used for disaster recovery purposes. We've also seen it just for generalized app migration in general. And so the more complete image, now kind of moving on from that cloud instantiation piece, is actually protecting workloads that you've got running in the cloud there all the way on the right. So that's cloud native protection. And so for this piece, the idea is that someone has kind of gone from just using the cloud for, let's just say, cold storage, to now using it for, let's say, production applications, to now being so seamless in running cloud native production applications or test environments in the cloud that they can now use Rubrik to also just protect those workloads running there. And this is going to be extended to not just your AWS and Azure environments, but also some selected SaaS applications as well. And that's a rapidly expanding portfolio. And so there you can kind of see Office 365. But, our SaaS protection is an area that's also going to be expanding in the near future as well. And so that was kind of the cloud journey. And anytime the conversation kind of stretches to cloud, especially with financial services, one of the most natural topics that comes up is with regard to data privacy, regulations, and making sure that things like the MRAs, the Appendix J compliance, and all that stuff is kind of being met. And so basically, regardless of where the apps are running, let's say on-prem, cloud, or where they're being protected, or where the backups are being stored, a lot of these regulatory pressures are top of mind. And what we're seeing is that, so baseline compliance might already be on the cards, right? So an organization may already be compliant with, let's say, MRA compliance or Appendix J compliance, but there tends to be a tremendous amount of pressure and concern about whether or not the organization will continue to remain compliant as they scale in terms of their people, their processes, and their technology. And so looking at just process, for example, today there might be not a need to have concern around a huge recovery plan. But again, as the organization scales, what is your recovery plan in the event of a large-scale breach or disaster? As your data set grows and becomes more valuable and more sensitive, what's the recovery plan in the event of a large-scale breach? Or especially looking as you're scaling your infrastructure, how will you remediate cracks as they appear in your infrastructure at scale? So just making sure that your tools are helping you more than they're hurting you. They're helping you simplify compliance and not being the actual problem in which you're trying to solve in the process of becoming compliant or maintaining compliance. And so Rubrik is really designed to kind of check all three of these boxes here and really simplify, the use of your FTE efficiency, designing your recovery plan and making sure that you can meet it, and then obviously modernizing your entire infrastructure stack and your technology process to simplify your compliance as the organization scales. And so the first regulatory compliance we'll be looking at is just what we're calling FFIEC's Appendix J. And this is essentially a guide for a lot of financial services firms to strengthen the resilience of their outsourced technologies. So basically making sure that it's a responsible use of any outside vendor's technology. And so there's two components to this. On the left there's collaborating with technology partners. And on the right there is requirements for technology providers. And so collaborating with technology providers is something that's kind of built in to Rubrik's, sales organization and how we approach our financial services accounts and how we kind of work with them in terms of support. And so on the top there, you'll see third-party management. And so this is basically managing that responsibility with the customer to make sure that all of the risks associated, all the business continuity risks associated with, conducting their business are mitigated by using our technology. But then also there's things like testing, which are things that come out also in part of pre-sales processes often is running some basic tests to make sure that, it can meet all of the RTO requirements and business requirements that these regulations have set forth. And on the right, these are more requirements for the technology platform. And so with regard to third-party capacity, Rubrik is a cloud scale product. And so basically, regardless of the scale of the disaster, you can infinitely scale Rubrik to make sure that you're meeting your RTO compliance at that scale. And then for cyber resilience, that's something that's been basically designed in Rubrik from day one, which I'll go through in the Rubrik security framework shortly, in terms of immutability and defense against cyber attacks, ransomware, and things like that. The next regulation is MRAs, and so that stands for Matters Requiring Attention. And so this is something that's coming from the OCC, that's the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. And basically, they issue these MRAs anytime they see a practice that deviates from sound governance, internal control, and risk management principles. And essentially, they have this 5 Cs framework. And we found that it's helpful to kind of communicate in terms of the 5 Cs framework, also in response to the MRAs, but also in communicating how Rubrik can fit in to simplify the compliance. And so the first C is the deficient practice, right, and how the practice deviates from sound risk management principles. And so as we're kind of moving through the 5 Cs, it's helpful to think about where exactly Rubrik fits, but also what exactly is the biggest challenge for you and your organization as you're thinking about navigating MRAs as a financial services firm. And so Rubrik, obviously is not the deficient practice, right? It's certainly also not the cause of the deficient practice. It's not the consequence and how it negatively impacts the bank of the deficient practice. But a corrective action, a correction, actions required by senior management to eliminate the cause of the concern, and then a commitment, so a plan to ensure that the concern is resolved. The idea is that Rubrik can certainly fit within these last 2 buckets, right? If we're thinking about the biggest challenges that the MRA is delivering to organizations, it's really not so much in messing things up, as you can see in the first 3 here. Having a deficient practice is maybe not the most difficult thing in the world. Things happen. But having a corrective action and being able to commit to a resolution to the OCC is really one of the more challenging parts of these regulations, right? And so Rubrik's ability to kind of come in, basically be the corrective force, and basically simplify the process of designing a commitment to the OCC is essentially the value add of where we can kind of fit in there in terms of the MRA. And that's not the end of it. And so as soon as the software is kind of deployed in the environment to kind of simplify the backup recovery, SLA compliance, and RTO compliance kind of piece, you have to be able to communicate that and basically how the new kind of software and backup kind of solution is going to be helping with your compliance. And so there's this entire component of all of these regulations that we've been looking at in terms of simplified reporting and being able to communicate the resiliency, the operational resiliency of your firm to your board members, but also to senior management and the regulators and auditors as well. And so here you can see that with Rubrik, you can very easily get all the data required here to generate a sample visual here shown on the left. And so here you can see the severity of the stress scenario plotted relative to the length of a simulated outage. And this can be done very easily with Rubrik. The idea is that as the severity of the stress scenario increases, so let's say the number of applications that go down, the size of the applications that are going down, the importance of it and the criticality of the application, the amount of downtime for the application relative to the broader kind of environment. That's going to increase the length of the simulated outage. So a lot of these regulations will require you to have an impact tolerance. Here we can see a sample 2-day impact tolerance, and the most extreme scenarios kind of pass that a little bit. And so with Rubrik, again, you can easily conduct these tests, get granular logging for all of this information in terms of your backup and restore times, and then plot all of it, generate your reports. Rubrik kind of automates that entire reporting process and exposes all the data, again, via the APIs, and also integrates with other tools that you would like to involve in this process as well. So things like your Splunks, ServiceNows, and your VMware VRA and VRO suite. And so that's kind of a high-level overview of some of the regulations we've been looking at and how Rubrik can kind of simplify compliance there on that front. So from there, we'll be moving into the Rubrik Security Framework, and that's a quick 3-step process, just a quick overview. And the way we look at this is really in terms of these 3 key columns that you see here. So on the left is security and immutability. So immutability being the ability to defend attacks from being, or defend your backups from being overwritten or encrypted. And so basically storing them in a read-only format file system and even then encrypted so that unwanted viewers can't really see your sensitive backup information. The next middle column there is cyber detection, which is really in terms of anomaly detection and being able to do a granular impact analysis on any attack that comes in. And the last piece is really key to any backup solution because you back up to recover. And so being able to restore workloads at scale across any set of applications and across any scale required, particularly for financial services where the RTO compliance is key for maintaining business uptime. So we have a quick slide for each of those capabilities. And so here we can see for immutability, I think the most illustrative way to communicate immutability with Rubrik and why it's such a valuable thing is looking at what happens when you don't have it. And so without immutability, you can see an attack can come in, it can hit your production environment, it can very quickly spread to your SAN, it can hit your disk-based backup, and next thing you know, both your production and your backups are hit. And so now what you're previously relying on as your insurance policy, your backups, is no longer there, and you're basically put in a situation where you're forced to pay the ransom, and even then if you pay the ransom, there's no guarantee it will even work. And we've seen this with so many different examples. City of Atlanta was hit with a pretty bad attack quite recently, and then also in financial services specifically. These attacks are, if not successful, they're undergoing pretty much every day. And so with Rubrik's native immutability, there on the right is an attack might come in and it might hit your production environment and stretch to the SAN, but with Rubrik, your backups are now safeguarded. And so it prevents attacks from attacking or encrypting your file data. And so in the event that your production environment is hit, your backups are safe, they're accessible, you can go in there and very quickly restore back to your production environment. And in this way, you prevent yourself from having any business downtime, which could be on the order of millions of dollars per minute. But on top of that, you're also saving your business reputation and basically just getting up and running in no time at all. And so that's the immutability piece. The next piece is for cyber detection. And so, again, it helps to kind of look at what has to happen before Rubrik or without Rubrik if you don't have the cyber detection piece. And so here you can see identifying an anomaly is a huge challenge if you don't have an existing tool in place. Basically, you don't know you've been hit until you've been hit at that point, and who knows how much time could have lapsed and how far the attack could have spread, which brings me to the next piece, which is on diagnosing the impact. And so here you have to manually identify the scope of the attack, which is prone to a tremendous amount of human error, and it's hard to really validate which parts have been hit, which parts haven't, if you really search through every nook and cranny of your organization, and allocating the amount of time it would take to do that. And the last piece is obviously recovering the files, which is, again, another fragmented process, not too dissimilar to the first slide that we were going over with all the different backup components and having to manage all of that. I mean, imagine having to get your organization up and running again if a sizable chunk of your primary environment was hit and you're recovering from tape. So these are very complex and time-consuming processes, and basically prompted Rubrik to kind of design a better way of recovering and mitigating the risks of a ransomware attack. And so here we have an ML, machine learning driven approach towards identifying the anomalies. So basically what Rubrik does is between each backup, what we do is we look for anomalous changes in behavior in, let's say, any given directory. So a directory that may have previously had, let's say, an average 5% change rate, if it's now had a 100% change rate where the entire directory has been compromised, that's something that is likely anomalous behavior and can be flagged. From there, Rubrik will automatically do or enable the granular impact assessment, where you can basically go through, just like you would on, let's say, a MacBook Finder, and look through each folder to identify which files have been added, modified, or deleted. And from there, again, that native immutability piece still continues to come in, where your backups are safeguarded and secure with Rubrik, and with a single click, you can basically restore. But one of the key value adds here is that now you know exactly what's been compromised. You've been alerted earlier in the process as soon as there has been a compromise. And one of the biggest time drains that we've seen is that organizations are rolling back entire systems when really it was probably just a subset of that information that may have been compromised. And so with Rubrik, you can accelerate the recovery by just recovering exactly what it is that you need to recover. And looking at the last piece in recovering at scale, one of the biggest examples, one of the biggest questions that we get asked, again, as a vendor selling into the financial services space, is how to handle the event of losing an entire cluster. And so really, especially for financial services post 9/11, a lot of the regulations are looking at, well, what happens if a fire happens, or let's say a truck kind of drives through a data center and you lose everything. There still needs to be an element of recoverability and a healthy amount of redundancy in the data in enough places to minimize business downtime, but also to minimize data loss. And so here we kind of have a sample architecture that we've seen be quite popular in the financial services space, and that there could be two data centers. So here we have DC1, DC2, cluster 1 and cluster 2, and each of these respectively has its own air-gapped S3 archive. So that could be an on-prem object store like a NetApp storage grid or what have you. And there's bidirectional replication, so everything that's at DC1 is also at DC2. But what makes Rubrik unique is that we back up all of our data along with the metadata, which enables complete mobility of the entire backup set, both the data and the metadata, to any new Rubrik cluster that can be spun up pretty much anywhere. And so here, in the event of a complete disaster, you lose this entire cluster, all of that data that was previously in cluster 2 can now be recovered to a totally newly spun up or newly provisioned cluster 3, and all the data and the metadata can now be restored to it. And that's a unique capability for Rubrik, because a lot of other vendors are really just archiving the data, and the metadata may just be on the local backup appliance. But again, for Rubrik, since all of that data is kind of passed on to the archive, it can all be restored to a newly provisioned cluster, and there's zero data loss, even if you've entirely lost the other one. And since the replication here is bidirectional as well, anything that was lost at cluster 2 is obviously going to be available as cluster 1 as well. And again, having that data and metadata archival and replication aspect means that a new cluster could also be spun up at data center 1, and it can be replicated there from the S3 archive. And so that kind of concludes most of the content that I have today. And so with that, I'll go ahead and open the floor, or the chat, I guess, for Q&A. And yeah, happy to address any questions. Is there anything that you've seen coming kind of while we've been going through?
Absolutely, yeah. Great presentation. Lots of good questions coming in here. Let's see. Before we do our questions, Cheyenne, I just wanted to bring up this poll. The poll on the screen I want to call everyone's attention to is, what additional information would you like about the Rubrik solution that you just learned about? So we'll leave that up while we do some Q&A. Let's see, I'll sort these questions into the Rubrik folder, and feel free to call out any that you want to answer. But the first one that I'll start with is, how can I use Rubrik to recover from ransomware?
Yeah, great question. And so the key thing that we've seen with recovering from ransomware is that there's typically two different options. And that comes down to whether or not the customer has purchased a SaaS application, Radar. And so I kind of went through the Rubrik security framework earlier. That has a couple different components. And so the part that's native to cloud data management is the immutability piece. And that kind of ties back to the analogy that I made earlier, the example that I shared, where a ransomware attack comes in and without immutability it would hit your backups as well. But with immutability, your backups would be safeguarded from the attack. And so again, native to CDM, you could just use the native immutability of CDM and safeguard your backups and be able to recover from a ransomware attack. But an added layer of protection from ransomware is the radar component that I was going over earlier. And that's the product that has ML-based anomaly detection to identify an attack, basically the instant it's hit, or basically the delay being only the SLA between your backups. And from there, being able to enable the granular impact analysis where you can click through, identify what exactly has been added, modified, or deleted, and then recover just that. And so that is really, let's say, like the premium kind of ransomware recovery kit. And that part is a separate SaaS application, not really native to CDM. But for organizations that are particularly concerned about ransomware, as we've seen, especially in financial services, Radar has been a huge value add. And we have plenty of customer stories around how it's been able to help there as well. And so really two options, kind of a foundational and then also like a more comprehensive ransomware recovery kit as well.
Okay, nice. Next question here. Tony's asking, can you describe the on-premises solution? So, I mean, what does a typical Rubrik deployment look like? Is it hardware? Is it software? Is it just run in the cloud? Or what's the design there?
Yeah, another great question. So the question was to describe the on-prem solution. And so basically, Rubrik is a software-only solution, right? So CDM is kind of a software fabric that extends across your multiple data centers, clouds, your different backup infrastructure, and eliminates the need to manage all those different piecemeal components. But that software obviously has to run on somewhere on-prem, right? And so you can run that on commodity hardware. So you can run that on, Dell, HPE, Cisco appliances, or you could run it on one of our turnkey appliances that comes native to the platform. You can kind of just roll that out in your data center. And it's a 2U appliance, 4-node cluster typically, and you can basically scale that to your heart's desire to meet all of your RTO requirements or your data retention needs.
Nice. Okay. Another question here, they're asking, can you walk me through the recovery options depending on the use case? For example, single file versus large scale.
Yeah. And so basically Rubrik offers, let's call it three different options for your recovery capabilities. And so the first one, let's say your tier 1 recovery needs, those are the applications where you really need that near zero RTO. And for applications like that, we offer two options. So there's live mount, which is the use case where you could spin up the application or database directly on Rubrik, and this is going to be separate from the production instance. And option 2 is just your standard instant recovery, where you can recover a VM or database back to your production environment, again, with near zero RTO. So basically minimizes your downtime completely. And so that's an option that we've seen used for, let's say, the top 10 to 20% of your most critical applications. Oftentimes, in the event of a large-scale breach or recovery, customers will use instant recovery to recover the most critical applications there. Now, for, let's say, that second tier of applications, where if you're prioritizing, these can maybe be delayed a little bit. We have an export capability where the recovery time may not be near zero, but it can be, on the order of minutes and still be a relatively quick process of exporting, let's say, a VM or database back to the production environment. And the last or the third tier of recovery capability is typically more for those granular searches. And so, as you may know, if you're putting something in the cloud, it can be quite cheap with, the deep economics of, let's say, cold storage. But getting things out of the cloud can be quite expensive. And so with the egress costs, the way we've designed our search and recovery capability to get around that is the idea that you can search for a file, go all the way down to the file level, and pull that file out of a VM backup and recover just that one file from the cloud to minimize both the time that it takes to find the file, but also minimize the cost associated with recovering a file from the cloud and minimizing your egress costs. And so just to summarize there, there's the instant recovery near zero RTO piece. There's, let's say, the second tier, not quite as critical application recovery piece. And then there's also the granular file level search and recovery piece. So you definitely have your pick of options for your different recovery scenarios.
Very nice. Yeah, a lot of options there. All right. So I'm afraid that's all the time we have for our live Q&A here, but lots of other questions coming in. I mean, if people want to get started with Rubrik, what do you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, I recommend, so here, I guess looking at the survey kind of live right now, yeah, we definitely do have some data sheets and technical white papers that we can be distributing later. But yeah, to get started, I highly recommend setting up a call with sales, letting us know kind of what are some of your top initiatives, what are some applications in your environment, what does your future state ideally look like with Rubrik, and getting on a call with sales and seeing what we can do to help.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for your great presentation today. Great to have you on.
All right. Thanks. And again, thanks everyone, and I'll talk to you soon.
Awesome. And thank you to Rubrik for supporting today's EcoCast event. Check out the Cloud Data Management for Digital Enterprises solution brief that's there, available in the Handouts tab of your audience console. And of course, visit Rubrik.com for more information and to sign up for a demo with a sales representative. And now I'm excited to introduce our next presenter on today's EcoCast. That is Mr. Kevin Lash, Head of Global Financial Services Strategy and Solutions at Nutanix. Kevin, take it away.
Hello, thanks for having me here today. It's exciting to have an opportunity for the next 20 minutes or so to talk a little bit about what's happening around the world in financial services, specifically around financial services transformation, infrastructure modernization, and cloud adoption. In particularly, we want to focus on what is happening around the world with the global pandemic and how is it impacting some of these things and what are the learnings that we're getting as we all go through this in real time. So first of all, congratulations on everybody making it through the first phase of this crisis. I think we've got future phases to really get the technology perfect and operationally resilient. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're going to help you do that today. So, fact of the matter is, well before this crisis, financial services digitalization or digital transformation has arrived. I mean, it has arrived in many different facets of our business. On the left-hand side with the fintechs, the ones that are most notable relative to the innovation that's happening in the industry. But the traditional institution on the right, looking at how they take that innovation into their institution and really make that institutionalized for the industry at scale. And there's been a lot of rebranding around the financial institutions, as you all know. Specifically, this example with ING. I love the branding here. You know, we're Australia's oldest fintech, and we are profitable. I like the profitability sort of dig there. But the fact of the matter is, ING is a customer of ours, and we are platforming that innovation at ING. So we're very proud of the work that ING has done to take this innovation as fintech and having really operationalized that over really the last couple years and with us. So the other thing that's really important, and I'll be talking a lot about customers, using customer examples, but the other thing that's in production today is blockchain. It's amazing to me how much we've talked about blockchain over the years, and now it truly is in production. So this example with JP Morgan with their interbank information network, a lot of the institutions that will be viewing this are part of that network, are exchanging trade finance exceptions across the network, reconciling with their counterparty. So tremendous network. It's really grown since it was first announced at Sibos in Toronto, went live in Sibos in Sydney, and has been live now for quite some time, and it's in production. So that is a very exciting implementation as well. So all of this change has really pushed financial institutions to take a hard look at replatforming their institution. And I just love this face-off between Jeff Bezos and Jamie Dimon. It's just a great reflection, no pun intended, between the two perspectives of the disruptors and the people who are being disruptive. And in this case, J.P. Morgan, Jamie Dimon saying he's not sure where his competition is coming from, but he needs a platform, an infrastructure that's going to make sure he can respond. And he believes that may actually come from Amazon. And you can understand why he thinks that. If you look at, just look at Chase's website and you look at all the Amazon products that are being derived and developed to compete with this, with this banking entity, you can understand that not only are in some ways financial institutions using AWS, but they're also competing with Amazon. Really a fascinating dynamic. So all of this change has really compelled a lot of financial institutions to realign their partners. The partners that they aligned previously are not the ones that are going to really take them into this new innovation, this new world of digitization. And we've been very, very fortunate during the last crisis to introduce hyperconverged infrastructure as a foundational element of a replatformed financial institution. And we've captured market share over time. And now we are one of the leading providers of infrastructure to the financial services industry. And it's all really happened in the last 10, 12 years. But it's amazing how quickly our customer base has grown. And if you look at our customer base today and sort of what we're reflecting on when we talk about these case studies is really a population of well over 2,000 institutions, about 12% of our overall customer base. 300 of those are in the Forbes Global 2000. Really hit all segments of the industry: banking, insurance, and securities. Equally distributed, amazingly so for a U.S. company, but equally around the world. We have a significant customer base, about a third in Europe, EMEA, in Asia Pacific, and here in the U.S. and North America. All types of institutions, tier 1 and tier 2. So what is happening around transformation and cloud adoption right now? And what are we seeing from that in this crisis? So first thing I think we would all agree is that business strategy is now technology strategy. They're so intertwined that you really can't separate the two. And if you look at some of the surveys in the industry, we can even take it further. If you look at the first one in the upper left here, the UBS Evidence Lab survey and report. I'm a big fan of UBS and the UBS Evidence Lab, and they really look at this survey specifically around 5 specific areas of budgeting: security, IT maintenance, core system modernization, innovation, and compliance. And then they looked at it from a tier 1 and a tier 2 financial institution. And we know that when the tier 1s in this case are defined as above 100 billion in assets, not a lot of companies or financial institutions in that mix, but enough. And just about everything else, thousands of financial institutions around the world would fall into below 100 billion. And when you look at that survey, it was very clear that institutions that responded to that, and these two, tier 1, tier 2, that tier 2s were significantly at a competitive disadvantage when it came to IT maintenance run rate relative to innovation. So certainly tier 1 institutions are very good at scaling and then applying that scale to innovating, and tier 1 institutions are really at a disadvantage in that regard. And so our infrastructure really helps deal with that gap, that growing gap. If you want to take the tier 2s even further down and you want to look at just tier 2 institutions between 2 billion and 10 billion in asset size, it is even clearer the disparity in the tier 2 organizations in that range, where if you look at their expense growth, and the expenses right now in COVID-19 are extremely important, cash flow and expenses, you will see that the expense growth in that range is 9% compared to all other to the top performers, tier 1s at 6%. So again, big disparity in IT maintenance run rate and expense, and we need to really help all of financial services be successful in this new environment. And what I find fascinating on the right-hand side is just one example of a customer of ours, SunTrust and BB&T, which form the 6th largest U.S. bank. became a merger of equals between SunTrust and BBT, creating a new entity called Truist. And Truist made no bones about it. They clearly came together, and although they don't look too happy about it, they're actually doing exactly the right thing. They're coming together to form a new innovative technology platform at scale because they recognize these trends. So what do financial institutions need? They need two things, right? We talked about IT maintenance, we talked about innovation. On the IT maintenance side of the equation, they need simplicity, choice, reduced costs, and hyperconvergence. So this whole concept of hyperconverged infrastructure, which was founded in the last financial crisis, really addresses these IT maintenance drivers. But they also need innovation. The same platform needs to create innovation. What do we mean by innovation? We need speed, versatility, resilience, and usually that revolves around a hybrid cloud discussion these days. So when I mean hybrid cloud, I think a lot of folks have thought of cloud first strategy as really public cloud. And I think the industry has clearly said, no, when we say cloud first strategy, we mean hybrid cloud. And in some cases, we mean hybrid multi-cloud, which is a new vernacular that's coming out into the industry. And there are really three takeaways. So we did a survey of our own, the Nutanix Enterprise Cloud Index for Financial Services. That is available to all of you. Hopefully you'll take advantage of reading that report. And really the three key takeaways there were 91% of the institutions that were surveyed, tier 1, tier 2, said hybrid cloud is the ideal model. 1% of them actually expect to be fully implemented as hybrid cloud, if not hybrid multi-cloud, in the next 3 to 5 years. One of the things that I thought was really interesting is financial institutions are coming to the realization that either public cloud isn't ready for them or they just aren't ready for public cloud. And that may be driven by data locality laws, data privacy, and other factors. But 71% indicated that they are starting to pull workloads back to on-prem that they originally had sent over to public cloud as they started their cloud initiative. And then over 59% of the financial institutions indicated they're still running these three-tiered legacy data centers, and they're not getting the ROI and TCO they need out of them now that there's this hybrid cloud approach. And as a result, they're expecting those to shrink, be re-platformed as hyperconverged infrastructure, and really only over the next 18%, over the next 3 to 5 years will there be 18% of these data centers in place. So understanding all that, what does that mean? What does that look like? And I think this picture really helps sort of snapshot what we're talking about. So we need to take these legacy data centers on the left. We need to make them cloud enabled. We need to convert them to hyperconverged infrastructure. This is a stepwise migration to establishing a private cloud control plane. And what we're seeing is with tier 1, tier 2, that there's especially in tier 1, tier 2s, a desire to run their data center as a managed service, outsource their data center, but not give up control, in combination with having an on-prem private cloud, and then implementing even some public cloud services from other providers as a service. Like Nutanix, we provide a number of infrastructure elements or capabilities as a service, and then have full integration with the three big cloud companies to create this sort of hybrid multi-cloud control plane. And one of the things that I think is very important for our industry to understand and very clearly a concern is how big these public cloud companies are, how big they're going to become, and how systemic the risk they will bring to the industry. And it's unlikely that all of the entire industry will move to public cloud, but we do need to balance operational resilience and regulatory resilience as systemic risk when we look at hybrid cloud and multi-cloud. So this is the picture we're all trying to get to as an industry. Now, when we look at it beyond that, we start thinking about, well, what is the migration path? How will we bring these things together? So on the business side, certainly the business, if we start at the bottom, at the foundational level of infrastructure, the business may certainly see benefits from investing in infrastructure, such as lower IT costs or higher productivity in terms of provisioning and responsiveness of IT to their service levels, additional security controls, compliance, and operational resilience, all of which are very important. But the business is really moving forward on these innovative digital applications, digital transformation initiatives, blockchain, fintech, omni-channel, payments. The industry is really totally reinventing itself, delivering itself as a digital enterprise. It needs IT to come closer to it, and they need to become closer. Sometimes we call that DevOps. But really what we're trying to bring is the IT capabilities closer to the business to create that agility and that continuous improvement and continuous product cycle and delivery. So we need modern infrastructure architecture, cloud native platforms, and DevOps all built into the foundation as we evolve the enterprise. So when we think about how do we do that for a very large enterprise, we have to do it for the most part in a building block approach. So we want to look at it beginning with infrastructure. We'll look at it as data center modernization as a discrete block of work. That may be everything from file systems to storage to compute, all as a hyperconverged implementation. We'll start implementing our private cloud control plane as hybrid cloud. We'll layer in our individual public clouds and cloud-based services from other entities. We will want to look at data as data services, data as project as a discrete implementation. That'll be everything from provisioning databases as database engineering and how we manage databases, as well as big data analytics and all this challenges with elasticity around big data analytics in our business. Application services, we're going to focus on the whole lifecycle management of an application as dev test. We're going to look at it from a core banking, a mainframe transformation type focus where we're moving mainframe COBOL applications to maybe something like Micro Focus COBOL and an X360 platform. We're going to implement dev test. We're going to implement DevOps. And then we're going to look at it from an end user computing perspective. This, in all honesty, has become the priority with COVID, is all the digital workspace, the VDI implementations, the remote office, branch office support, all being done remotely from being virtualized on-prem. And that's been a big focus now with COVID. But we need to look at all of this holistically, and then we need to go into these very specific building blocks, and we need to start evolving our infrastructure along those workloads and use cases. So when we think of all of that, we still can't forget that there's a huge risk and regulatory implication here. Everything from fintechs invading the space and trying to get bank charters to the whole regulatory oversight around operational resilience, to data localization, to systemic risk with cloud companies. We all need to be thinking about all of that regulatory framework that's going to be evolving with us as we continue to change. So what do we learn from the pandemic? I think we've learned a few things, and I just think it's been an amazing time for us. It's a very difficult and challenging time for our IT teams. They should be certainly celebrated for the successes they've had. We are not done. We've answered the call on the initial response. We have to do a lot more to make that part of an operational, resilient platform for virtualizing desktops and remote offices, both from now this perspective. So JMFin was a great example of virtualizing high performance desktops and really looking at these investments. When I look at what did our customers invest in, why did they invest in it, and what benefit did they receive once they had to respond to the crisis. And in the case of JMFin, which is wealth management, as we all know, wealth managers, traders, quants, all require high performance desktops. These are power users. They are completely unforgiving. They do require a lot of storage and memory and 4 to 8 monitors. And I was amazed at how quickly JMFin, who had already invested in VDI and hyperconverged infrastructure, was able to take these power users, which is basically their entire workforce, and move them and shift them to homework in a very, very short order. So they learned very much that the digital investments they were making were not just to solve a specific on-prem requirement, but really help them prepare for the unexpected. So we learned that. We also learned that digital investments do pay off at scale at the enterprise level. So TD Ameritrade, another great story about the COVID crisis that's been in the press, certainly in the industry press quite a bit, around their Halo desktop. And so when they developed their Halo desktop, they built in remote access. Now that was not intended to be remote access at scale for all their workers, 10,000 workers, but they were able to take their Halo desktop built with Nutanix and actually pivot that completely to work from home. So that was originally a digital transformation, digital investment for virtualized workspaces that they actually got the benefit of work from home during the crisis. So again, the whole concept of an enterprise digital investment, looking at that digital enterprise, focusing in on virtual desktops relative to end users and remote offices, and then really using that as a opportunity for resilience and operational resilience for this type of crisis. Very fascinating. And then the last one I thought I'd bring out is just this, the one that about American Express. American Express, there's been a couple articles on that. 65,000 workers going from on-prem to remote. But when they look at it, and when they looked at the whole desktop challenge, and when they invested ahead of the curve, it was really as hybrid cloud. So I very much respect Evan and what his team has done at American Express. And when he talks about his response, he's not talking about it as virtual desktops or remote desktops. He's talking about it as a workload in a broader context of hybrid cloud, as just one capability of hybrid cloud and cloud-based services. So that is I really believe the crux of what we want to try to create. What is hybrid cloud going to provide? Is this full stack agility to the business, regardless of what that business is faced with over time. And you need to do that at scale and at speed. And VDIs should be part of everybody's hybrid cloud stack. So that's very important. So again, it all starts with a shared vision. I think how you work with your vendors, how you work with Nutanix should have a shared vision. It should be, first of all, they need to support the digital transformation of their organization. We need to help the IT organization be more flexible and be more of a force for change, be more connected to the business. All in the context where controlling costs is necessary, and it's never going to be more necessary than it was during the Great Recession when Nutanix was born, and now again in this situation where we're looking at cost controls, risk and resiliency, and very much innovation. So we got to do all three of those things at the same time. So that's going to lead a lot of people to hybrid cloud, as it did with SocGen, one of our customers. I just think Randy Allen, when you summarize it, it's really all about value realization. I think Randy did a great job when he sort of picked these three and sort of boiled the ocean down to these three things. Fungibility. Is your workforce, your IT workforce, flexible? Do you have to hire specialists, or can they operate the system from a common control plane with tools that make things more simple, that you have more fungibility with your resources and your capabilities? The user experience. Now, the user experience is two ways. It is the end user of the technology, which in many cases may be your frontline workers, your branch workers, your call center, your power users, but it's also the way they are enabled to serve the end customer of the financial institution. So user experience around productivity, user experience around end user support, user experience around the bank customer, how they experience that digital transformation. And then lastly, speed and agility. I don't think this COVID crisis could be any better summarized than the need for speed and flexibility as we responded, and making the initial investments over that really has been a leg up for a lot of financial institutions coming into this crisis. So lots of resources. If you're interested in talking more about this, I'm excited to talk to you about it. We have lots of resources. We have ebooks and we have webinars, and happy to share those with you. We have the ability to get hands-on with the technology if you'd like, your practitioners or you yourself would like to get hands-on with the technology, just to understand the technology, the interface to the technology. You can use our test drive facility. It's free. All you have to do is sign up and get in there and use it. Doesn't require any training. It just gives you an opportunity to jump in and take a look at and get hands-on with this technology. And then hopefully we can come on site and do maybe a boot camp and meet with you and spend some time talking about your institution and your challenges, and we can do that in a boot camp. So I do very much appreciate your time with me today, and I hope you have huge success as we move through this crisis and ultimately get to the other side, and hopefully we can partner with you to do it. Thank you very much.
Great presentation, Kevin. Are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah. Okay. Awesome. Well, really cool presentation. Thank you so much for that. We do have a number of questions coming in for you. And while we answer these questions, I've brought up a poll question for the audience. I want to call everyone's attention to that. It says, what additional information would you like about the Nutanix solution? And we'll just leave that up while we do some Q&A. So let's see, first question that came in, they're asking is, with financial services companies struggling with security and compliance concerns, what can Nutanix do to help?
Yeah, if you think about security and compliance, and you even think of it further as data privacy and governance, the whole concern here with cloud adoption is that financial institutions cannot put their institution at risk to drive a digital transformation and infrastructure modernization strategy. So that is really pushing most institutions to look at hybrid cloud, and in some cases hybrid multi-cloud. And so what Nutanix does is we provide the management control plane and the private cloud infrastructure to enable that that modernization and that platforming of digital transformation, either as an enterprise-wide replatforming or really focused on specific applications or workloads. And from that, we have very much a defense in depth capability relative to really leading edge security capabilities, feature functionality. We call it defense in depth or security first design, and that protects the institution. So that gives the institution the control over their compliance and IT policy relative to where a workload or a piece of data should reside, how that is monitored over time, and what workloads are using that data, and then we can segment and secure the institution that way. So that is driving a lot of the hybrid cloud conversation, point of fact.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If you guys can help with security and compliance, then that's going to, I know, entice a lot of financial services companies. Second question here, does Nutanix have an ROI calculator?
We do. We actually have two groups. One is we have a TCO ROI group that has a terrific model, and that's headed by Steve Kaplan. And Steve actually wrote the book on TCO ROI. So if you go out to Nutanix.com, and you'll find that book, and you'll be able to grab that. So that's TCO ROI, and we do have calculators associated with that in his group. And then we have this new group called Cloud Economists. And the role of the cloud economists is actually model deployable workloads and helping institutions model those specifically to determine, both from a security and data perspective, but also from a cost and compliance perspective, how those workloads would run on-prem versus off-prem in a public cloud setting, and how then how mobility will play into that over time. So we have the Cloud Economist group, and then we have our own TCO ROI group.
Nice. And I do have to recommend that ROI storybook by Steve Kaplan. I did an event with him, and he actually was nice enough to send me a physical book of the ROI story. It's a great book. But the good news for everyone on the call today is you can download the book for free, the ebook, over at Nutanix.com. And so for any company who's doing ROI analysis of private versus hybrid versus public, it's a great resource. All right, side note, moving on to some more questions here. They're asking, what hardware is compatible with Nutanix?
Yeah, Nutanix is a software-defined infrastructure, and so we're agnostic on the hardware side. So we'll run, Dell, HP, Lenovo. We have strong partnerships and relationships with all those companies relative to those deployment environments. So we don't mandate a hardware environment for our customers. We let them choose the one that they have a pre-existing relationship or one that they've proven out their institution on. So we just implement on top of that.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that makes it easy. Next question, can Nutanix help with the recent rise in remote work?
Yeah, so that has been a big driver of our business, especially in financial services, in our Q3, which would be about Q2 calendar year. And so if you think about our business, 25% of our total business came out of financial services in Q2, which is generally our run rate. But then we've significantly delivered into the virtual desktop requirement. So many of our customers, and you'll read about them in the industry press, American Express and JM Fin and TD Ameritrade, all of them are talking in the press about how well prepared they were for the COVID crisis relative to work from home. And so all of them had invested in Nutanix for different reasons, cloud, digital transformation, or maybe even trader desktops in the case of JM Fin. And all of that was put into action very quickly. And I just did a webinar last week with Cadence Bank, who also talked about this. So we have a full virtualized desktop environment that enables work from home in a secure capability. And then, they were designed for both on-prem and remote deployment. We also have remote office and branch technology, virtualization, so that helps as well. So yeah, we've had a lot of success. Our CEO was on Kramer, Mad Money, the other day, talking about our earnings and our strategy, and Kramer even said, definitely Nutanix has been undersung relative to what we've delivered for COVID and work from home. So it's nice.
Nice, absolutely, yeah. All right, well, Kevin, I'm afraid that's all the time we have in our live Q&A session, but it's been really great having you on the event today. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Come back again, hopefully.
Absolutely, yeah. For more information on Nutanix, check out the test drive that Kevin talked about in his presentation. If you go to Nutanix.com, check out the test drive and give Nutanix a try for yourself. Also check out the ebook that's available for download there in your audience console on architecting the digital enterprise. And with that, it's time for our first gift card announcement. We have an Amazon $500 gift card going to Adam Rosenberg from Pennsylvania. Congratulations. 2 more gift cards to give away still on today's event. And now I'm excited to introduce our next presenter on today's EcoCast. That is Mr. Robert Benoit, Vice President of Solutions Engineering at NetApp. Robert, take it away.
All right, well, thank you. My name is Rob Benoit. I'm a Vice President of Solution Engineering for NetApp's Globals, Verticals, and Pathways. It's basically our top 120 accounts in the company globally, and then I also am responsible for our Pathways organization that focuses it on integration with service providers and global solution integrations. So today we're going to talk a little bit about modernizing in our view within financial services, specifically around a lot of the transitions that are going on in the industry and across the industry. So one of the things we see is, we're certainly well along in the digital transformation, but in the companies that we work for and work with, the ones that are most focused on, data driven and driving data into the business, we're finding are really accelerating their business opportunities. So some of the things we find these companies are able to do is, number one, to really reinvent that customer experience, whether it's through new applications or through AI and data analytics. They're really trying to create a different experience and really drive those experiences directly into their customer base. They're also really looking to drive and adopt new technologies. And this is a number of areas they're focused in on, but the ones that are able to create those adoptions are really able to streamline the way that they operate these companies and with a drag effect of really increasing their profitability. While they have to do this, when you become more of a data-centric organization, you have to do this while still securing all that customer information. And we're seeing more and more regulation, certainly on PII data, and what we're seeing in some of those areas. These customers and companies still have to create new models that can secure it and manage that data. So our approach to this and how we're helping these customers is really in a couple of areas. One of the first ones is really trying to help them innovate, and by leveraging things like cloud services, and how do those cloud services expand those use cases and help them drive new operating models and also new application landscapes. We're also using those new clouds to create these new cloud infrastructures. One of the things we find in a lot of our customers is they're moving away from the build, run, operate models and really focused more on building these cloud infrastructures to support the next generation of workloads. But still, they have to maintain and manage the legacy workloads that are still kind of core to their business. And the other thing we're doing is we're really allowing them to connect to any one of these cloud providers in the public space, and even in their own private cloud deployments, and then modernizing those environments through advanced sets of data management capabilities. And this is really core to what NetApp's been investing in over the last 5 years, and we're doing that through these partnerships and engagements with these customers, certainly in the financial services vertical. So we think about it, our approach is what we call the data fabric. And the data fabric really is an architecture that supports advanced data management capabilities and services that are really built to support and accentuate a hybrid cloud architecture. We fundamentally believe that there's still going to be a set of workloads that will live on-prem in on-prem architectures, and we're certainly continuing to invest in those as a company. But we also see a wide range of workloads and use cases that are being designed in the public cloud. And the integration of those two together is really where we see this modernized data center approach. So when we think about how we're building this, it's the concept of connecting public and multi-cloud services with next-gen data center designs, and we'll talk about some of those use cases, but also then integrating it into enterprise IT organizations where there's a set of attributes and things that an enterprise IT organization, especially in financial services, needs to manage and maintain. So things around data protection, security elements, data access and controls, and of course all the data insights and visibility of what they're doing inside these environments and how they're leveraging these different architectures is core to that. And we've done this through a set of partnerships, both with the technology providers for more of the on-prem business, but also transitioning those on-prem businesses into the hyperscaler solutions with a focus on AWS, Google, and Microsoft Azure. So the strategy for these hybrid cloud environments is there's a couple foundational principles that we look at when we work with our customers. We look at how do we create the most flexibility in the model, which is really around freedom of choice, right? You do not want to be locked into an architecture that only allows you certain elements, especially when you're putting all these investments into building this at scale. So freedom of choice is absolutely there, whether that's freedom of choice of the on-prem private cloud platform you decide to deploy, and whether you're making a transition from one vendor to another or one architecture to another, or you want to integrate into a public cloud service. We want to make sure you have that freedom of choice to choose which public provider you work with today, and then the freedom to choose a different one down the road, but still providing a set of services that are very tailored towards what your business outcomes that you're driving towards. The other thing has got to be around simplicity. One of the big promises of the public cloud and things they're providing is a set of expertise to automate and create services that are very easy to attach to. And this has really been the growth of the public cloud is really around the simplifying, a complex infrastructure and delivering that as a set of services. And those services can be rapidly consumed or deconsumed based on the workloads and use cases and really where you are in your customer journey. We've seen some financial services customers rush to the cloud and move a lot of workloads into some of these public services and then reevaluate those decisions down the road and move those back into on-prem. And a lot of that flexibility and simplicity are things that we're hyper-focused on when we think about building out our customers' data fabrics with them. And then, of course, you have to do this certainly in financial services all around a set of protection elements, whether that's through compliance and regulation or through business protection, meaning I've got to make sure that infrastructure resources are always online and available to support the applications and business workloads, or whether it's through making sure that I'm providing protection from external threats, whether that's through cyber attacks and hackers and everything else that goes and are always being infiltrated inside of these environments. So as we break this down, some of the foundational things we've done is we look at it as infrastructure as a service, right? This is really what this transition has provided inside of our customers. How are they moving from those traditional build, run, operate models into delivering infrastructure out as a service? And when those customers are on this journey, they're looking at a couple foundational tenets when they think about building out infrastructure as a service. Things like latency and density inside the data centers, or density in the workloads themselves, throughput capabilities, and then, of course, on the protection side and availability side, RPO and RTO targets. Is it all cloud connected from an infrastructure service perspective? Do I have worm capabilities or tiering or encryption requirements? All these things are elements, and the list goes on, that when building out infrastructure as a service architectures, the goal is to drive down the risk by simplifying those services, but also driving down the cost by workload consolidation and simplification. When we look at NetApp, what we've done is we've built a set of platforms to support this in use cases, right? We've got, NAS and SAN architectures that plug into more of the traditional storage services. We've got low-cost components we use with other partners through OEM relationships with our E-Series platform. We've delivered an HCI platform, which is a simplified infrastructure building block for a lot of private cloud services and workload use cases that integrates and simplifies the connectivity between compute, networking, and storage. We've got object platforms, which are unstructured, scalable, unstructured platforms for a number of use cases. And then, of course, delivering all of these capabilities as software-defined platforms or software accelerated, and certainly in use cases around remote office caching and high-performance workload caching. But we've also, over the last 5 years, integrated all of these sets of infrastructure as a service capabilities in with the hyperscalers. So we've taken our platforms and integrated it with Microsoft Azure and AWS and GCP, which allows us to provide a consistent set of services, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud. And our customers are consuming these at different rates, but providing a standard set of attributes that they can scale into. So a storage fabric for us has a number of elements. It could be, Ethernet, it's got iSCSI and fiber channel capabilities, but it's also addressing a lot of the access point protocols that are important. And then when you build all this out, the majority of our customers are consuming this through a functional set of APIs. And that's really what this storage fabric is all about, is creating a set of storage and data management elements and then driving that through an API consumption model. And that's what our customers are building with us with their storage fabrics. On top of that is what they're delivering out to their clients. These, platform as a service or workload elements that can then support a number of different use cases within the environment. The goal of these is to drive down the risk, but of course increase the agility. You want these to be consumed at a very aggressive rate based on how the business is being rolled out. Certainly testing out and developing new workloads is important for this. So we look at how do we drive these new elements, and they look at these in different ways. How do I discover and integrate these different workloads in a very consistent way across these different platforms? How do I automate and then optimize those services to meet the needs of those workloads, whether they're set workloads today or developing workloads tomorrow? But it's also then how do I provide a set of data protection security elements that can secure those workloads? And all this has to be done across what we would call a set of elements. And what we've done at NetApp is we've taken those same platform as a service elements that are requirements in most environments, and we've now delivered these out as a set of cloud services. And those cloud services can be consumed the same way you would consume any other service from any one of the hyperscalers. So we've got everything from Cloud Manager, which gives you a single pane of glass view to provision and deploy services both in the cloud providers, but also on your on-prem environments. We've got compliance capabilities, sync capabilities where I can move and sync data between different cloud providers or even between the on-prem environments and the cloud providers. Cloud Secure is a way to provide a security element, and whether that's standardized encryption models or secure access points consistently across these different environments. So you still get that freedom of choice, but you can also then deploy knowing that I've got a single model that allows us to simplify those different operations. And then, of course, cloud tiering, maybe cold data that's being run on more expensive infrastructure, whether that's higher level of cloud services that we offer, or on-prem environments on, like, say, all expensive all-flash architectures can be tiered out into cloud providers where the I/O and cost requirements are much lower, but also the scaling of those secondary storage pools are much more relevant when it comes to cost controls. And then, of course, cloud backup and SaaS backup, which are cloud backup native capabilities to allow you to move a set of workloads from on-prem into the cloud or vice versa. And then Cloud Insights think of it as an analytic platform that connects all of the elements of these infrastructures together and gives basically object-based correlation between what we're doing from a services perspective and how that translates down into the infrastructure consumption spaces. So how am I using my capacity that's in AWS or my compute in AWS? How does that tailor back to the applications and the services I'm delivering out from this PaaS architecture? And all those things can be consumed natively through these cloud services that we've built and can be deployed directly through our cloud portal at cloud.netapp.com. And then this becomes our customer's data fabric, right? So we put in here, we started as NetApp's data fabric, where we were using that as a strategy for design elements. We now offer this as our customer's data fabric, and we've got a number of use cases where we work directly with the customers to help them build their data fabrics to support a set of workloads, which is what are actually delivered out. So whether these are DevOps environments that are being delivered to a set of developers to build the next generation application landscapes, or whether it's a transition into CI/CD models where you're doing consistent integration. And we've actually built at NetApp a set of services to support this for our own application development. Or these are more traditional enterprise applications. You're looking at database workloads, with Oracle and SQL Server or next-gen databases like Mongo or Couchbase. Or you're layering on top of this a set of containers orchestrated and automated through Kubernetes. And we'll talk a little about this a little bit later in some of the workload definitions as we get into this. VDI and EUC, a great use case, certainly in the COVID space, with a lot of our customers moving towards full remote-based workforces. We've been doing a lot of work in the VDI space, which I'll talk about as a use case in a moment. And of course, AI and analytics. How do I take legacy, batch-based, big data architectures and then transition those into more value from that data through real-time analytics? And I'll talk about some of those use cases also. So this becomes this concept of fabric orchestration. And when you think about what this provides for our customers, this is a way to orchestrate and automate a set of services that could be consumed by the business so that they can build and deliver a new set of experiences and business outcomes to their customers. And this is all the concept of this fabric orchestration, which is the concept of the engagement work with a lot of customers around. So from there, let's dive into a couple of examples in this space to provide a little bit more clarity on and color around how the data fabric works across some of these use cases. So one of the first ones I'll talk about is end user computing architectures or certainly workspace architectures around, certainly with VDI. So some of the things that we've discovered over the years and being a foundational back-end storage platform to support VDI architectures is VDI is difficult, right? Certainly doing it at scale. So if you think about lengthy procurement processes, the startup cost to deploy VDI is very expensive, very long to deploy, right? It takes a lot of IT knowledge to understand how to do VDI at scale, and then of course the complexities that go along with that. And then of course, how do I transition my IT resource that I've had for a while, whether those are assets supporting remote desktops or current VDI deployments, or even the skill sets to start looking at some new models and embracing things like the cloud as a good option for VDI. So these things have exposed a lot of challenges, and what we do is we can make this a lot easier. So through some engineering work and investments that we've made, we've come up with a model which we call NetApp's Virtual Desktop Service, or VDS. And if you think about VDS is an architecture that basically orchestrates and automates the management of virtual desktop services across an enterprise. So what we can do is we provide basically a SaaS control plane to basically manage your entire virtual desktop stack. And this includes a number of different elements into this, right? So this could be everything from the users themselves to the applications to the files or databases, the configurations and profiles, right? All this stuff can now be automated, and we could do this across the full spectrum of deployment capabilities, whether you're deploying or have current deployments of VDI on-prem, or whether you're expanding those capabilities to the cloud providers, whether and any one of the cloud providers, whether it's Microsoft Azure, GCP, or AWS. We also provide the full spectrum of VDI implementations. So whether that's Windows Virtual Desktop with Win10 plus the Azure managed platform, or you're looking at RDS, remote desktops, which are really non-Azure deployments, and that also includes all your on-prem. So it really is a full spectrum approach to how we look at and manage VDI. So if we double click into this into a minute, we're really streamlining what this management and automation would look like. So we can do the deployment automation. So click, point and click the assets on where you want to and how you want to deploy those. We can do all the user management and the configuration management. We can also do the app management of what applications will be deployed and based on different profiles and users that will be consuming into this virtual desktop service. And then, of course, all the resource scaling and optimization. That's everything from entry-level users, call center users, all the way up to what we're seeing more relevant are these high-performance profiled users where we can actually automate the orchestration of, let's say, GPU-based desktops for more of those aggressive users. And we're seeing that whether it's in our media and high-tech customers all the way down to our financial service customers that are deploying GPUs for more of the top-tier aggressive use cases, but certainly, testing out AI workloads or more of the high-performance type of workloads. And then, of course, doing this through a nice SaaS web portal. So giving you a single entry point, single pane of glass where you can come in and manage and architect all of these different capabilities. And that's whether you're building this on a private or a hybrid cloud, or whether you're doing this in the public providers. So we've built foundational components with our HCI platform, which allows you to plug this in as an infrastructure as a service building block to support these and then automate all the tasks that would go in within that. So if you're building new and you want to build in a blend of high performance users, including even adding in GPUs into those HCI architectures so that you can then get those high performance users, all the way down to more of the maybe commodity users that you can look at in the public cloud. We've also built some of the public cloud workflows to support some of the high performance users. So it really is a policy-based architecture that allows you to choose how and when you're going to do that across a spectrum of different use cases for VDI, whether that's VMware vSphere or you're looking at Hyper-V as a use case. So when we think about what this VDS control plane architecture is, it's basically to manage multiple different VDI across multiple different clouds simultaneously. So if we're looking at the on-prem cloud environments, right, we have the VDS custom clients on one side of that are firewalled apart, but still we can manage that through the local control plane. But we can also look at a customer managed environment. And that's everything from desktops through the apps and the Active Directory architectures. So we can come in on either side to this and consume those services and provide basically a single control plane on how you would manage that. We can also integrate this directly into Microsoft's Windows Virtual Desktop architecture, where now you're looking at RD clients that the customers manage, so those remote desktop clients managed by by our customers, or whether it's Microsoft managed, meaning they're coming in through their Windows Virtual Desktop API, and then we're tapping through this control plane their services. And then the customer managed, whether it's Azure AD or however they're deploying it, we can support both of those at the same time. So you can really provide a transition from on-prem management into Azure management, embrace the next-gen technology with Windows Virtual Desktops, but yet still provide a consistent VDI experience for the customers. And that's all done through the NetApp's VDS control plane. Very scalable and provides not only, like I said, a management architecture for today, but a transitional platform as our customers want to start taking advantage of next-gen capabilities through some of the public providers. So when we look at, in summary, for VDI and how do we recognize the full potential of the data fabric, well, it gives us a number of unique capabilities that are just not available with other architectures. Embrace the on-prem capabilities with NetApp's HCI platform as a plug-and-play architecture to support virtual desktop services, or leverage any one of the cloud providers and use that as an infrastructure service to support those, and do that all at the same time. So you can do this across clouds or on-prem. Take advantage of the simplicity of this. Normally, if anyone's managed large VDI environments, they could take weeks to provision at scale. You could do this through deploy VDI at large scale in just a few hours. So it really does simplify this. It also builds the simplest on-prem infrastructure to support this through our HCI, but it then also looks at you can enjoy the full experience to burst to the cloud when needed, or start in the cloud, and for a set of users that are more relevant or more sensitive to staying on-prem, you could still provide a seamless experience. So one of the other workloads I'll spend a few minutes talking about is AI and machine learning in financial services. So really it's around building your data pipeline, and that's one of the major focus areas for us, is how do we help our customers enable a data pipeline to support these AI and ML workflows. So some of the things we built, very similar to our approach for VDI, is we're leveraging the data fabric to build an AI control plane that sits on top of that. And the goal of this is to deliver a full stack end-to-end AI workload management experience, right? And to automate a lot of those AI workloads, and really the data that goes along with that, to expose a number of data services under the covers, but then plug it in through a seamless integration within this. So if you start all at the top of the workloads, we're using Kubeflow, and then of course Kubernetes for orchestration. We've got a Trident service that sits between the orchestration automation to expose all of the cloud and storage services that I talked about earlier when we talked about some of the capabilities of the data fabric directly into Kubernetes, so that an AI or data scientist can go in and automate data capabilities directly from the tools that are used to using, and using that through Kubeflow, which then exposes those capabilities directly through Kubernetes. This is all done through our AI control plane. And this is really providing a single experience for our customers that can go across any one of the public clouds, but also leverage private clouds and the on-prem capabilities. And even if these are doing on built and designed storage systems, we can do that. So what are some of the things we're doing for this? So if we look at financial services and really what's the impact that COVID's had, we're seeing some good use cases in two areas. Number one is in fraud detection. One of the things that COVID has certainly been doing is driving a lot more online transactions. In fact, e-commerce is up over 23% in March alone since the beginning of really the lockdown and the impact on COVID. But the digital transactions for 2020 are forecasted to reach $4.7 trillion, which is almost a 20% year-over-year growth. The downside to this, with more digital transactions, and certainly on the rise, and will continue to be on the rise, these financial services customers have seen 86% increase in cybercrime, and that's just between the weeks, the months of March and April. And that's just when you think about the challenge that these financial services companies have, is how do I continue to increase e-commerce and digital transactions, but yet still control the cybercrime that's going on. And that's a big use case that we're seeing more and more AI use cases around fraud detection, and working with a lot of these customers to help them build these models. They were always on mine. They're accelerated through these new through this new experience. And then market risk analysis is another one. One of the key things here, if you look at it, is the volatility index is the highest that it's been since 2008. And that was when the big stock market crash, or certainly the market crash happened. But one thing that's different in this one is that there's a higher risk of acceptance throughout COVID, which throws a lot of the models off. So we're working with a lot of our customers now to help them get better handles and leverage AI better, to really look at a new market profile, because you're just seeing these differences where traditionally when the volatility index is high, the risk profiles dropped. But now the risk profiles are just as high as they were before. So this is providing certainly some investment opportunities, but through that is they want to use AI and machine learning to help drive some of those. So how are we working with our customers? Number one, we work with a great partner, NVIDIA, to build an NetApp ONTAP AI building block. And what this is it's an architecture that we build and design that can accelerate a lot of our customers building these AI workloads or AI platforms to support a lot of new workloads. It's a proven architecture. We work directly with NVIDIA to support it. It's very simple to deploy. Comes with configuration guides and validated architectures. Plus, it also integrates. We work with a number of different partners to integrate this into the AI workflows. We've got a list of different capabilities that we do there. We can also deliver performance and scalability. So start small and then non-disruptively grow as you build it, but then also intelligently manage everything from the edge to core to cloud. And that's one thing you saw on the previous slide is we're doing this not only in the data center, but we're doing this all the way out on the edge with edge computing or all the way into the cloud providers, and then connecting those data elements together to give a seamless edge to core to cloud data experience, which is opening up a whole new set of capabilities where they can start on-prem, expand out in the cloud for some of the modeling and training elements, but then bring that back into the data center when they start getting more consistent go-to-market initiatives. And then the other thing we're looking at is we see different use cases based on how they want to deploy and how our customers want to deploy. So we've come up with a number of different portfolio use cases based on how you're looking at. So we've got ONTAP AI, which I just talked about, right? It's a very complete a solution with the AI control plane sitting on top of this. But we also have partnership with Lenovo for entry-level AI, where we're putting in, working with NVIDIA and Lenovo to provide an entry-level system. We have a FlexPod AI, which is our partnership with Cisco for UCS compute. And this is a 10-year-old go-to-market partnership that we've had to deploy a number of different use cases if we already have customers that are deploying our FlexPod technology. And then we have for very, with like DGX SuperPods or white box solutions, a partnership to look at InfiniBand and our E-Series platform for a number of different use cases. And we have partnerships with IBM, Spectrum Scale or Bees GFS to support some of those more high performance scale out type of use cases. So it really is a core set of capabilities and portfolio options as we look at this. And all of these are still powered by the data fabric. So regardless of how you decide to deploy, you can see that the data fabric is a foundational, it brings a foundational set of capabilities that allow you really to choose how and why you're going to start deploying some of these different technologies. So how can we help drive better outcomes, right? And this is really around harnessing that power of the data fabric. We're really looking to drive real-time insights to make better business decisions. This is about driving the business. We're also looking to drive more value from the data. We have a lot of customers that have many different data sources they're bringing in or legacy data sources they've had. They're just trying to tap into those data sources to get more value out of what they've already had. And then really we're trying to help our customers build at scale. Think of this as AI as a service. And we're starting with a lot of our customers to build small, but then to grow as these use cases are continuing to develop and allow them the flexibility to grow on-prem or directly into the cloud providers. And we're really working with our customers to drive to better outcomes. And the foundation of all this is the data fabric. So thank you for your time today. David, I'll turn it over to you.
Great presentation, Rob. Really enjoyed that. Really cool stuff that you guys are doing at NetApp. So thank you for sharing that. We have time for just maybe a couple quick questions. First one is, what other areas can you highlight for the data fabric?
Yep. Yeah, I think, we talked certainly on VDI and the AI ML use cases. Other use cases include, next generation containers architectures with Kubernetes. We're doing a lot of work in helping customers either augment their current private clouds with Kubernetes and containers or building from scratch. And then bridging, Kubernetes provides the foundation of abstraction of the infrastructure. Well, we're still providing the data fabric elements to support that and then help automate and accelerate some of those use cases. So those are some of the ones I'd also think about when you think about data fabric enabled hybrid cloud use cases.
Nice. Okay. A lot of different applicability there. Next question is the hybrid cloud still a preferred method that you're seeing most of your customers use?
Yeah, we've seen it started off as, building private clouds on-prem and replicating a set of services that the public cloud providers were doing and building those on-prem and most financial services customers. Then we saw, some business units and areas start to consume direct public cloud services. And now what we're seeing most of them doing is the core IT groups, that were developing these private cloud services, now working with these cloud groups that were looking at the public services and integrating them together into one approach, which is really around that hybrid service. And with COVID now providing a different work experience for a lot of our customers, we're seeing those initiatives really start to accelerate. So it's been a great time for us working with our customers, start showing them what's possible and then working with them to help them build their version of the data fabric.
Nice. Okay. And then final question, what should people do to get started?
Yeah, I would start with, visiting our site at cloud.netapp.com. And a lot of the things I talked about today are showcased there. And there's a number of things you can do on that site. You can test drive some of these capabilities. You can run some proof of concepts. You can actually model out what you're trying to do, and we will give you some recommendations of different services that you may want to look at. Plus, you can contact anyone at NetApp through that portal, and then we can do some follow-ups for more deep dives around how do we make that data fabric relevant and bring that business capability directly to you.
Nice. Cloud.netapp.com. Well, excellent presentation. Thank you so much for being on the event today, Rob.
Thanks so much, David.
All right, I've just brought up the poll question that says, what additional information would you like about the NetApp solution? If what Rob talked about in his presentation resonated with you and you have some interest in cloud.netapp.com, I encourage you to fill out this poll question. Of course, we appreciate it. Really cool stuff that they're doing there at NetApp with NetApp Cloud. So I'll leave that up while I announce our next prize winner. That is for an Amazon $500 gift card, and it's going out to Julie Gordon of Missouri. Congratulations, Judy Gordon of Missouri. Now, don't forget we have another $500 gift card to give out after our next and final presentation. So, of course, we hope that you will stay tuned for that. All right, I'll give everyone a few more minutes here to answer this poll question. And then I'll introduce our next presenter here on today's Financial EcoCast. All right, thank you everyone for the responses to the poll question. We do appreciate it. And now I'm excited to introduce our next presenter on today's EcoCast. That is Mr. Andy Fernandez, Product Marketing Manager at Zerto. Andy, take it away.
Hi everyone. Welcome to today's session sponsored by Zerto, titled Modernizing and Securing Financial Environments. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Andy Fernandez, and I'm Product Marketing Manager here at Zerto Software. If you have any questions, we'll do our best to answer them throughout the chat. And also, feel free to download our data sheet focused on financial services that's available here on the ATM website as well. So thank you for your time, and I'm really appreciative. So let's get started. If you think about the market landscape of financial institutions from the last 5 years, everything from consumer expectations to development has been driven by fintech disruption. And I mean fintech disruption not only just in community and corporate banking, but also in investments, in insurance, in mobile payments and everything, right? Organizations like Stripe, Chime, Coinbase have completely restructured the way we approach finances and our expectations as well. And it's pretty obvious if you just look at the news and stay in touch with what's going on with these financial institutions. Let's take a look at some examples. For example, just in banking and investments and insurance, we're seeing continuous investments, continuous not only seed funding, but large series A's, B's, C's, and D's, focus on making sure that these companies have cash flow enough to be able to develop products that can compete with large corporations. They're continuing to do so, they're continuing to displace organizations, and it is becoming a problem for your traditional financial institutions. So let's take a look at understanding what are some of the predictions for financial institutions even before COVID-19 and what that means for banks, insurance, and investments like yourself. So if we look at some of the 2020 predictions that were actually written and analyzed by PwC, this is all done before COVID-19, but they still stay true. The first thing that they talk about is the fact that fintech continues to drive new business models. And one of the areas where it's driving not only new business models, but a new look at architecture, a new look at distributed platforms is the value and the disruption that blockchain is doing and what it's doing not only to user expectations on privacy and visibility into financial transactions as well. Another thing, even before COVID, was the fact that customers, even employees and partners as well, are looking at a digital-first approach. They'd rather have a digital experience, whether that is via mobile, whether that is via an ATM, rather than having an on-premise experience with an actual person. And that's not only in banking, that also applies to investments, and it applies to money management, even lending. And another big prediction that they had is customer intelligence. What do you do with the data that you gather from your customers? And what they're saying is this is going to be a massive predictor of growth and profitability for organizations as well. Now, to compete with a lot of these things, to develop new products, to deliver new digital services, you need the infrastructure to be able to do so. And PwC, along with many others, predict that the public cloud is going to be the dominant infrastructure model that's going to allow your organization to scale resources accordingly. But ultimately, a major barrier, a major risk that needs to be mitigated is cybersecurity. If you think about how prime financial institutions are for attacks like ransomware, it's a serious consideration for organizations, not only just the CISO, but the IT organization as well. Now, these were predictions before COVID. Let's take a look at what additional predictions and factors you have to deal with in the world of COVID-19. There are really three things that have changed. One is we've talked about the digital first approach even before COVID. But what we know now, what we're seeing in consumer behavior is that adoption and expectation of digital only is mandated. It's accelerated demand, and those who can deliver those digital services are gaining a much higher competitive advantage. You're also expecting fully remote customer experiences. That's something that, as infrastructure and organization leaders, we've had to devote time to make sure that remote employees have the devices, the resources, the bandwidth, and the security to be able to have a fully immersive experience and to be productive at work as well. And then ultimately, you're also seeing an even faster adoption of public cloud use. So if you think about it, even 3 or 4 years ago, Gartner made had a survey around cloud adoption, and over 80% of these organizations said they had a cloud-first strategy. But there was still a massive gap between having a cloud-first strategy and actually implementing and moving operations towards a public or private cloud. So these are three very important things and considerations that we need to take a look at. And just for some validation and statistics, let's take a look at what McKinsey has published. And I'm going to provide a few more examples of this, but as you can see, consumers expect to increase usage of digital bank services even after the crisis ends, while decreasing in-person visits. This isn't just a phenomenon that's going to go away once everything settles with COVID-19. These behaviors are sticky, and organizations are going to customers and partners and even employees are going to expect more digital services. Now, let's take a look at a few of those examples. As you see here, markets are going to advance towards the next normal at a different pace depending on their starting points, right? You're looking at digital services, digital sales, and human-centered virtual channels. These are not easy to implement, let alone support from an infrastructure perspective. So when we think about this, when we think about not only the challenges, both economic and technological, that we have before and after COVID, let's take a look at some of the imperatives that you have to deal with as well. And from an imperative perspective, these are keys to success within this era. Is one, you need to be able to support new digital services and accelerated application development. You need to accelerate cloud adoption, not only just moving something like disaster recovery to the cloud, but actually moving DevOps to the cloud and supporting multi-cloud for reliability of your infrastructure. You need to be able to mitigate the risk of cyber threats, right? Become a cyber resilient organization. And you need to do all of this while still slashing reactive IT costs. We know that we still have to keep the lights on, but you have to do your best to minimize and reduce costs around your infrastructure, around your resource, and your labor as well, for something that is not proactive to digital services. Now that we think about that, let's think about the actual realistic challenges that we all have to face. Because keeping the lights on isn't as easy as it sounds. You still have to address the unplanned downtime and data loss, even the increases in unplanned downtime that COVID-19 may have added. And you need to do so while managing data growth and sprawl. You now have data across your remote organization all over the place and behaviors that sometimes you can't control. A lot of organizations are dealing, especially in financial services, are dealing with an aging infrastructure that requires a lot of time and a lot of refresh and maintenance as well. And if you look at your stack with your tech stack within I&O, you have siloed solutions for disaster recovery, data protection, and cloud mobilities, tools for migrations, tools for archive, tools for backup that are really antiquated. They're based on legacy approaches, and they take a lot of time, resources, and energy to keep up. And ultimately, you're also dealing with vendor lock-in. These are all key challenges that you have, but it's not impossible to address, right? And if we were to think about these in two different ways, you have your unplanned and your planned downtime as well that you have to address. So let's take a look at what that means. Well, most organizations are dealing with two types of downtime, one good and one bad. And what I mean by bad is unplanned downtime. Things like infrastructure failures, natural disasters, even cyber attacks like ransomware. This also includes your day-to-day recovery operations like user errors, file deletions, and even file corruptions. And then you have somewhere in the middle where you have to deal with the legal requirements, compliance, and having to archive data, for example, with GDPR. But then you have the downtime that results from proactive activities. Think about hybrid and multi-cloud strategies, right? When we talk about supporting application mobility, cloud protection, even cloud-to-cloud migrations. And then there's also additional operational services that you have to support, such as migrations and consolidations, patch management, DevOps, and even infrastructure modernization that ultimately is a good thing, but it still demands downtime. So these are the way we classify things. And what we focus on really at Zerto is making sure that we can support all recovery scenarios, both reactive and proactive as well. And let's take a look at how our platform reflects that. So the Zerto IT Resilience Platform, before I get into this, one of the most important things about the platform is that it is a true platform, meaning there are not several SKUs that make up all of the use cases of this platform. Once you purchase the IT Resilience Platform, you get access to all capabilities such as disaster recovery, operational recovery, long-term retention, and what that really means is data protection or solving for backup use cases. You get the capabilities for hybrid and multi-cloud and operational services. This is all on a foundation of continuous data protection with the ease of orchestration and automation, and all wrapped around Zerto Analytics, which gives you full visibilities not only to how your organization or your data is doing today, but also forecasting resource requirements of the future. And this is all supported with strong strategic alliances with Microsoft Azure, AWS, IBM, VMware, Microsoft Hyper-V, and even HPE, and now recently Google Cloud Platform as well. But let's look at what makes up the real technology, the real differentiation of the platform. The first and most important thing is the journal-based recovery. And that all stems from Zerto's replication technology. Zerto focuses on near-synchronous replication at the hypervisor level. So instead of taking antiquated snapshots, what you can do with Zerto is essentially record checkpoints every 5 seconds of your data and point it towards somewhere to another device or to another region. And what this allows you to do is essentially get ultimate granularity and industry-leading RPOs. Now, the journal itself is the means to recover that data. So let's think about a scenario like ransomware, right? And with Zerto, we've been able to replicate checkpoints every 5 seconds, but you're hit with a ransomware attack. And let's say it's at 1701.56. And in a perfect scenario where you know exactly when your data was encrypted and can do so quickly, with Zerto, you have the ability to simply roll back to rewind and recover 5 seconds before. And when you do that, you can, at a specific checkpoint, recover an entire site, an entire application, but I mean that a full application stack, a single VM, and even perform file level recovery. Now this addresses the RPO. But when you think about RTO and how much time it actually takes for organizations to recover, it's extremely important to understand how we address the application itself. So Think about your multi-VM applications, right? Your enterprise applications that consist of multiple VMs. And when you have a backup process or an incremental snapshot process, what you do is you take snapshots of that data throughout the backup job. So when you have to recover that application, you now have inconsistent checkpoints across that same application because the VMs are snapshotted at different times. Now, this takes a long time to recover and really leads to RTOs of days and even weeks sometimes. What Zerto does differently is that we allow you to simply treat your applications as one logical entity, what we call a virtual protection group. And with a virtual protection group, you have the ability to simply designate all of the VMs that make up this application, and you can essentially protect, move, and recover the entire application stack as one unified entity. This allows you to quickly recover entire applications to the same point in time. We've already delivered the industry's best RPOs, but we do our best to simply be an easy button for recovery, making sure that you meet your SLAs for RTOs as well. Now, what about infrastructure? With Zerto, we're vendor agnostic. We really do not care where you replicate to and how. So with our replication, you have the ability to retain your on-premises strategy, right? Both with VMware vSphere or Microsoft Hyper-V. You have the ability to adopt IaaS, whether that's AWS or Microsoft Azure. And we even give you the ability to make sure that you can replicate and move towards a VMware-based public cloud. Think of VMware as a service that IBM Cloud, that Google Cloud, and even the Azure VMware solution offer. What that means is you can essentially move to the cloud and gain all of the benefits of the cloud without having to refactor or re-architect your VMware applications and configurations. And we also have an extensive network of managed service providers that you can use. So ultimately, whatever infrastructure works best for your organization to reduce cost, to increase reliability, Zerto allows you to do it seamlessly and with no difference in performance. Now, we've talked a lot about having a multi-cloud approach, being able to select whatever infrastructure you have to be able to recover entire sites, entire VMs and applications, and having visibility into all of it. But what's most important is how easy it is to actually perform this, meaning that you have one interface and one experience with simple management across on-premises and cloud. This means that you have seamless orchestration, whether it's migration, failover testing, or actually performing a failover in minimal amount of clicks. And you can do all of this without having to have an impact on your production environment. And that includes your DR testing with automated compliance reporting. And all of this comes with full visibility and control from one single source or a single pane of glass. But I want to dive in a little bit into the compliance aspect because that's really important for financial institutions. So with Zerto, you have automated compliance reporting, meaning that the moment that you perform a DR test and it is successful, you immediately get reporting that you could provide your organization. This allows you with regulatory compliance mandates from PCI, ISO, SOX, HIPAA, the SEC, and even GDPR. And this is an extremely important aspect because so many organizations struggle to streamline their testing process with various employees spending hours and hours testing annually. With Zerto, you can do it seamlessly with no impact to your production environment, and the reporting aspect is automated as well. This is a huge advantage for financial institutions. But let's take a look at some of the financial institutions that have benefited from Zerto. Now that we've taken a look at Zerto's capabilities and a look under the hood of the IT resilience platform, here's some market validation from financial institutions who trust Zerto. For example, with Liberty Mutual, they really leverage the non-disruptive DR testing capabilities and reporting that we have. And they even saw a reduced time of their DR tests by 63%. Their entire DR testing process is done in less than 3 hours now. MetLife considers Zerto the only option to protect and recover their most critical applications. And even Putnam Investments is explicitly using Zerto to make sure that they achieve compliance. Organizations trust Zerto to make sure that they can recover from any incident, that they can remain compliant, but that they actually can reduce resource and investments as well within the IT organization. And now that I've talked about reducing resources, let's take a look at a few case studies of how Zerto delivers a return on investments for its users and the organizations. how Zerto delivers ROI. For example, HCA Healthcare was able to replace multiple point solutions from 4 to 1, saving over $10 million in total costs. BJ's was able to completely eliminate their secondary site by going to the public cloud, realizing a savings of $800,000 in 3 years. Starbucks was able to improve their operational efficiency, seeing a 16-time decrease in time spent on production support processes. Even United Airlines is able to protect a website and app that generates over $1 million an hour and avoid the cost of both unplanned and planned downtime. And XPO Logistics was able to merge 21 data centers into six data centers in 36 months, being able to optimize their infrastructure utilization. This is all done within the Zerto IT Resilience platform. So if you're a financial institution and you really want to put an end to not meeting your SLAs, you want to stop disrupting your production environment, and you want to really converge all of the data protection, DR, and cloud mobility tools that you have into one, the Zerto IT Resilience platform can do that while still making sure that you save time, energy, and resources as well. I want to thank you all for your time, and we can move over to the Q&A section as well, and I hope I can answer all of your questions. Please also download the datasheet focused on Zerto for financial institutions. Thank you so much.
All right, excellent presentation. Thank you so much, Andy. We really appreciate that. Really cool stuff. So many great presentations today. I'm just so impressed. I brought up the poll question now that says, what additional information would you like about the Zerto solution? And I'll just leave that up while we take in questions for Zerto. If you have a question about Andy's presentation and how Zerto works, how it can help you, get that question in now because Andy's standing by to answer those electronically. I'll just leave the poll question up there while we do our final prize announcement. So the final Amazon $500 gift card is going out to Sandra Lambert in California. Congratulations, Sandra Lambert in California. I'll post all 3 of today's prize winners in the chat. All right, those are there now. And again, I want to thank you to everyone who answered the poll question. Let's get a few more responses coming in. We do appreciate those. All right. Thank you, everyone who responded to that poll. Before you go, I want to remind you to subscribe to the 10 on Tech podcast. It's over in the iTunes store. If you are a potential presenter on an upcoming MegaCast or EcoCast event and you want to chat with us, just reach out to us at connect@actualtechmedia.com, and we would love to see how we can help. And with that, I hope that you'll join us on future events. When this event ends, you'll be automatically redirected to our events center where you can learn about all the upcoming events from Actual Tech Media. I hope that you enjoyed the EcoCast today and learned a lot. I know that I did. We'll see you next time. Have a great day.